达赖喇嘛2011年卸下政治领袖身份之后，西藏流亡政府通过民主程序选出民选政治领袖。美国之音记者黄耀毅9月中在印度达兰萨拉藏人行政中央独家专访司政边巴次仁，畅谈他与拜登政府和蔡英文政府的关系，以及秦刚、李尚福等中国高官失踪之际，他对中国的看法。边巴次仁批评了中国对西藏的文化灭绝行为，强调西藏历史上的独立地位和中道政策，并驳斥中国试图把一个中国的原则套用在西藏。他认为达赖喇嘛立下的民主基础也将在下一代藏人手中继续成长茁壮。下面请看专访内容。
Thank you, sir, for your time talking with VOA. And like I said, I actually interviewed you back in 2016, but when you were Dalai Lama's representative to the United States. It had been 80 years. We go from Washington, D.C. Right now, we are in Dharamsala. So I want to first ask you, of course, your responsibility right now is different. You assumed the seat of Sikyong at 2021. It had been 2 years since then. Can you talk about your relationship with the current Biden administration? Do you think the current U.S. government is giving Tibetan enough support, attention?
I think from the time Joe Biden became the president, within a very short period of time, he appointed the special coordinator for Tibet. So that itself is a signal that the Biden administration is serious about the Sino-Tibet conflict resolution. Since then, the special coordinator, Azra Zia, has been quite active in meeting with the community leaders, visiting Dharamsala last year and this year again in Delhi, meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and us. So all these, I think, are quite good signs of President Biden's administration continuing with the policy that the previous successive governments have taken. So in the Congress also, yes, when you have leaders like Speaker Pelosi in the House, it makes your advocacy work very easy. Even now, she's very much involved. I think both in the Senate and the House, in both the parties, I think there is very good support. But then there are a lot of issues at stake, the larger issues at stake, and we don't have this over-expectation of United States leaving aside their national interests for the interests of Tibet. So we are realistic about our expectations, and we study the international situation very carefully and also take very measured steps in how we should move forward.
Talking about expectation, last time back in 2016, you said you were hoping right now the former President Trump will have a chance to meet with the Dalai Lama. It seems that didn't happen. Can you tell us what happened back there? How come such meeting never came into realization?
I think His Holiness did not travel to the United States from the time President Trump, Mr. Trump assumed presidency of the United States of America. And also there needs to be common interests. It's not just, if there is a meeting, it cannot be just for photo op. There has to be issues that concerns both the leaders and commit themselves when they meet. Otherwise, it just becomes a photo op. So perhaps because of these reasons it could not happen, and also because His Holiness stopped traveling internationally for a long time.
Sure. Talking about
maybe there are possibilities in future if His Holiness' health is better. Yeah.
Last time we also talked about President Obama during his 80 years. He met with His Holiness 4 times. I've heard rumors former President Obama might meet with the Dalai Lama again soon. Can you confirm that information?
I think the private office is the best office to confirm that. I've not been able to reach out to them on this matter. I did hear about a certain invitation having been extended to both the leaders by an organization in South India. But these are very much possible. So President Biden himself is also a Nobel Peace Laureate. So, and when he was in office, His Holiness and they both met many times. And every time His Holiness speaks more to the family. And it's not just him, but his wife and his daughters have also met with His Holiness. So they enjoy a very close relationship and commitment to peace in the world.
Sure. And so you are the second Sikyong elected through a democratic process and went through a peaceful transfer of power. We all know China does not have democratic election, but it had been criticizing the Central Tibet administration, including when you testified in the U.S. Congress hearing earlier this year. What is your response to China's critics? And what does that tell us when Tibetans in exile are able to enjoy democracy while Chinese people in China doesn't?
Now, Asia has its own historical roots and its practices developed over many centuries. But in this modern world, there may be a lot of deficiencies in democracy also. But then, comparatively, there are no other systems where people enjoy most freedom. So that is why democracy is very important. And His Holiness understood that from a very, very young age. He was born in 35. In 54, 55, he went to China, met with Mao, Zhou Enlai, all the leaders of those times. I was there for almost 1 year. And he saw how communist government functioned. Even though everything looked very orderly, there was no freedom for people to speak their mind. And then 2 years later, when His Holiness was just about 26, 27, he visited India. No, 21, 22. He visited India and he visited Indian Parliament. And even though it was quite chaotic, it was possible for everybody to express their thinking. So that is why he was very much influenced by democracy. And not even 1 year after coming into exile, he spoke about having a representative government. And 7 months after that, we had a post-parliament in 1960 under very, very difficult circumstances. So in that sense, His Holiness is a true democrat. And if it is not for his leadership, then we would not be where we are today. With all the organs of democracy in exile, very unique in itself. The only partyless democracy in the world, still unicameral, with no territorial consequences. So we have developed into a very, very unique democratic experience by ourselves. And in China also, when Chinese leaders say Asians have a different mindset and the system works for them, not the Western democracy, but then you also see the largest democracy in the world just next to China, India. So it's the commitment of the leadership, whether you want to transform into a peaceful society or not. Because right now, China is in a huge crossroad, I believe, because President Xi is in his third term, and nobody knows whether he will continue or not after that. There are no signs of leadership change or upbringing in the younger generation. So there are a lot of uncertainties, including in the very opaque displacement or replacement or dismissing or missing of leaders like Li Shangfu now, and some others are talking about another minister being lost now. So we don't know how. And Li Shangfu is somebody who's appointed by President Xi himself after the last plenary, and then the rocket forces chiefs you're talking about, and Qinggang. So all these are adding to the mystery and more confusion over understanding what Chinese leaders are really thinking about. So nobody is against China growing peacefully and giving freedom to its own people also, and maintaining better relations with a more responsible relationship with the whole international community. But unfortunately, right now, every new law or amendment to existing laws that are always ambiguous in nature are becoming more and more strict. There is no sign of loosening, despite all the pushback they are receiving from the international community. So they can't have it both ways. They want the international community's market, particularly improved relations with the United States and European market. They need the Southeast Asian market. But at the same time, they want to maintain their hegemony in the region. So all this adds to the distrust. And now lately, so many leaders, including Indian Prime Minister, at the G20 presidency was talking about trust deficit, which has always been there. So this is something the Chinese leadership will have to bridge it. That's very important, and they can't have it both ways. But nobody wants anarchy in China also, because that's going to have severe implication on the whole world, particularly the economy. But if there is one thing that can bring China down on its knees, is also economy. The underlying fact is that now, of course, the United States has realized this for a long time, but Europeans are also waking up to the fact that they cannot make China more powerful than what China already is. So it has, now if you look at the positioning of nations across the world post-zero COVID and the ongoing Ukraine war, you definitely see an ideological difference in approach in its polity. So that is very evident. And how now, who is going to wink first? That is something to watch out for. But a lot of new alignments are taking place, and the whole international order is reshaping itself in many different forms. And for some countries, like India, I think it's very precarious times, but they are, I think, doing a very good job of navigating the Shanghai Cooperation and BRICS, where the larger number of countries don't very much align with their thinking, but they're trying to take the international order to a new level based on rules and regulations.
I'm very glad that you mentioned the disappearances of Qinggang, Li Shangfu. That was actually my next question. Also on Ukraine, you also brought it up. So also the economy. So with all these things going on brewing inside China, the disappearances, the high officials, the economy, the unemployment rate, do you think that's going to play into favor to Tibetans? It's going to make Beijing say, well, we have to deal with all these things. We're just going to leave Tibetan alone for a while, and while we're dealing with those pressures? Or is it going to force them to put on more pressures to Tibetan people?
I think we have always believed in this saying. I think just as Tibet has this, every other community also has this hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And His Holiness keeps repeating this, reminding us about this. So we hope for the best that the Chinese government is stable, and it has a mindset to look after the welfare of its people rather than just controlling. Because presently the communist leadership understands only one thing: economic development for any kind of problem or conflict within the community. So they fail to understand the larger aspiration of the people. So in that sense, I think they need to redirect, they really introspect as to what people really want, or what they wanted when they themselves were suffering, including President Xi himself. Look into the past and look into your own emotions and see how you were treated. And now that you are the president, how would you want other people to live in freedom? And unfortunately, it is going the other way around. So on the issue, on the Sino-Tibet conflict, so far, His Holiness, when His Holiness started thinking about the middle way approach, which is Buddhist philosophy, of course, there can be a lot of interpretation about the polarities of the middle, but then I think politically, all we can say is the one polarity is the independent status of Tibet historically, and the other polarity is the situation of Tibet under Chinese control right now. So we have to find a middle way there. And when you talk about 1973, if you go back in time, we're talking about the throes of cultural revolution where everything is being destroyed, not only inside Tibet, but in the whole of China. So there was a big threat to the very survival of the identity of the Tibetan people. And that, I think, was one of the reasons why His Holiness decided to go for it. And then, of course, the other reason is that there are no countries in this world who recognize government in exile. And we didn't also push for that from the time India decided not to recognize the government in exile. So that being the case, there may be a lot of opportunities, so I think we have to definitely keep all our options open, but then we are committed to the middle way policy. And we as the 16th cabinet, we decided to change our strategy a little bit, our tactic a little bit in presenting the case to the international community, talk more about the independent status of Tibet historically, that there should be some recognition to the historical status. Otherwise, there's no value for the middle way, because people don't understand that His Holiness has stepped down from independence to middle way. And when countries keep repeating this statement at the behest of the Chinese government that Tibet is part of People's Republic of China all the time, then they are trying to gain the legitimacy from the international community, because the Chinese government knows that they have no legitimacy of their control over Tibet. So all these doesn't add up. The international community's reaction, on the one hand, supporting a negotiation between representatives of His Holiness Dalai Lama and the Chinese government, and on the other hand, repeating this statement that Tibet is part of PRC, then China rules Tibet with an iron hand, then where is the reason for China to come and talk to us, even though you support negotiation? So you are not speaking from high ground, you are speaking from a very low ground, even if anything happens.
Talk about China talk with you. Have you tried or already tried to resume a dialogue with Beijing? And if not, what is holding up? Was it the Beijing side is refusing to talk to you or to this administration?
We don't have official contacts yet. So I have mentioned it several times that we do have back channels. But we have a Tibetan saying also, the Chinese lose forever because they are too suspicious, and Tibetans too much over expectations. So I think that's very true for China, because they are very suspicious about everything you do or you say. So we have decided that it's our job, it's our responsibility to reach out to the international community till such a time that there is a resolution to the Sino-Tibet conflict. So just because Chinese government tells us not to do this or do that, that doesn't mean that we should stop our thing. Otherwise, there should be reciprocal improvement of situation inside Tibet for us to take some positive steps. So right now, just like in the whole of China, inside Tibet also, not just in Tibet, but also in East Turkestan and southern Mongolia. Every policy, every project is aimed at signification of changing everything into Chinese. So particularly younger children, we're talking about a million children boarding schools. We are looking at about a few thousand Tibetan, very young Tibetans between 3 to 6 years old in boarding schools. Now it has gone up to 150,000. We are not against educating the youth in Tibet. Even bilingual, it's okay. But it's only 4 Tibetan classes in a week. And now children, when they come back home, they can't speak Tibetan anymore. So that is complete signification of Tibetan people, turning Tibetans into Chinese in their mind, their respect to the Communist Party, their trust, everything about education, re-education, patriotic education. That is destroying a culture, and that amounts to cultural genocide more than ever before now in a very structured government engineered policy. China has already done a lot of things by moving all the Tibetan nomadic people into sedentarized communities and caused a lot of problems on Tibet's ecology and environment. We were removed from this stewardship, which we had learned over thousands of years how to manage this high plateau, the highest, what Western world calls as the roof of the world. So these are not good pointers politically, for the civil society, at all levels, religious freedom. Now they want to control everything, including reincarnation.
Yes, talking about controlling people, education, re-education, it's not only done by to the Tibetans. A lot of Chinese people are believing what the central government been telling them. So for example, at 2017, it's right here in Dharamsala, a woman originally from China disrupted a photo exhibition of the 1977 Lhasa protests with a scissor. But she claimed to be a follower of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But she disagreed with the different version of the Tibetan history that you are displaying over here. So there are people like her. Could be Han Chinese people, could be the future Tibetan people that was, re-educated. So you also need to win over their trust and their support. They only follow religiously to Dalai Lama, but do not agree with you guys. How do you earn their support?
I don't know about every single individual's Chinese thinking inside China. And if you ask a Chinese inside China, they heard story only from one side. They are not exposed to the truth. So we can't blame them also. They are deprived of freedom of information. So if they understand Tibet, now we know that more and more Chinese Tibetan monasteries are just becoming tourist destinations, not centers of learning now. Just recently I met somebody who went to Kumbum, and a reporter, and she said that there were a lot of Chinese tourists in Kumbum, but you don't see too much study in there. So to find now I think it's time for China to really introspect. I keep telling the international community, maybe you see China very strong today because of their economy. It's mainly because of their economy. They spend on military, they spend on political influence and artificial intelligence and space and everything. So now countries are becoming more strategic in their approach in reaching towards China. And now we also have to consider so many different situations as to what could be the possibilities, and then look at what are the opportunities that may arise out of the evolving global situation. So as we discussed earlier also, His Holiness has always been committed to common interests. He appreciates the concept of European Union, and he had said many times that if it had not been for the Union, there would have been so many wars in Europe itself, a lot of killing. So even in Asia, eventually we will have to think about a more peaceful Asia. That is also the reason why the middle way policy is so important.
So there's a lot of changes around the world, of course. We know Buddhism talk about constant changing things. We also know that His Holiness Dalai Lama is 88 years old. Yeah. He's still the spiritual leader and able to earn support around the world for Tibetans. If one day he is no longer with us, do you worry the support for Tibetans will decrease, and how will you address that challenge?
That will be still a long way off, as His Holiness keeps reassuring us that he will live for another 2 decades. He'll live up to 113 years of age, because there were propitious presaged that this Dalai Lama would live very long, and even now he shows his teeth and he says, I'm 88, but I haven't lost one teeth. Mm-hmm. So we have full trust in His Holiness that he will live very long. And that's also the reason why I tell my Chinese friends, let us see whether His Holiness the Dalai Lama outlives the Communist Party or the Communist Party outlives the Dalai Lama. Okay. So that being said, yes, whenever that time comes, it will be a huge setback. And His Holiness, I think, is the one person who is very, very aware of all this. That is why he prepared the community from 1960 onwards with democracy. Over the years, for 30 years, we had to struggle. People had no idea what democracy meant. We were scattered in so many different parts of India and the rest of the world now in more than 25 different countries. So these are efforts and aspirations and leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, despite all the setbacks that he must have faced, singularly over the last 50, 60 years. So that itself shows that now the responsibility is on the Tibetan people. Mm-hmm. So I keep saying to my public, even now, that so far His Holiness singularly went around the world with his folded hand and with his smile and his wisdom, and earned so much admiration around the world. Now, at least for the Tibetan cause, His Holiness is the incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, 1,000 eyes and 1,000 hands. Now, every single Tibetan will have to become an eye or a hand of His Holiness for us to be able to keep that momentum of the cause. Now, the responsibility that I see during my time, at least, is that we try to reach out to the Chinese government and try to seek a solution based on non-violence, negotiated, mutually beneficial, lasting solution. But on the other hand, we have to keep this younger generation of Tibetans prepared for the next line of leadership. So that is why we have programs like Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group of Tibetan leadership themselves, working alongside all those who are working on the cause of Tibet internationally. Now they are in so many different countries. They speak the language, they understand the system, they have become nationals there. So they have the right to request their representatives, so reach out to the think tanks and media. So all these are happening, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we have people, even if we have to struggle for another 30, 40 years down the line. When His Holiness is there will always be more support, but even when in the absence of His Holiness, we should be able to carry on that till the next Dalai Lama is able to resume his responsibilities.
I have two last questions. It's regarding something you said recently. So recently you refuted Chinese government's attempt to apply the One China policy to Tibet. And I'm assuming a lot of international friends and partners do not understand the differences between that policy. Yeah. So can you elaborate on that and why China is trying to push this agenda and why it is incorrect?
think, not many people understand that, and particularly politicians, they say principle or policy in the same breath. So you and I know that one China principle is between the People's Republic of China and Republic of China, saying that there's only one China, and they are the real rulers. Now, of course, since 1992, Taiwan has stopped saying all that, and they are now in more pragmatic position. And one China policy is the policy adopted by the United States government when they helped China open up to the world with Kissinger and Nixon's visit and 72 Shanghai communique, and then leading with the first formal diplomatic relations between the United States and China during Jimmy Carter's time in 1979. That was followed by the one China policy that was adopted. But at the same time, the United States also adopted the Taiwan-China Relations Act. So people are not able to now. Maybe from China's perspective, when they say one China principle, that also includes Tibetans and East Turkestanis and Mongolians. But from our perspective, one China principle has nothing to do with Tibet, because it's between Taiwan and China. And one China policy is between China and the United States. We had a different historical background and our relations with China. So we were the last to be annexed by communist China, and we are the only one that has an agreement with China in the form of 17-point agreement, even though it is now abrogated because China trampled on all the provisions of those 17-point agreement. So that, and then international position on that policy on the 17 points. So China's, like India, since India is the immediate neighbor of 1954, the trade agreement where India defines Tibet as an autonomous Tibet region of China. So these were the evolutions. So you have to look, when you look at Tibet, you have to look from a completely different prism. Taiwan relations is more complicated. So no, even in the ambiguity of China, in the text of the United States government, where the Chinese government has translated that as recognize, whereas the U.S. word is more acknowledge. So there's a lot of difference, international relations and legal terms being used on those things. So all this adds up to the confusion, but whatever it is, I think right now China feels the most insecure. So every single mouth that is coming out of China's leadership is stability and security. That is why there are a lot of commentators and also analysts talking about weak China being a potent enemy or a dangerous one, including Putin in his place. So. Those speculations are there, but my understanding is it depends on the severity of the threat to the survival of the Communist Party. If it is not that big, they might burn this hotspot on the Indian border, which they keep it burning. Then if it's more severe, then they'll definitely attack Taiwan. Otherwise, it's too risky for China to be isolated from the world. And technologically also speaking, Taiwan supplies 80% of world's microchips, so it's almost impossible. If you destroy Foxconn and some other companies there, what will happen to the industries? With or without the slump in exports and imports they're experiencing right now. So it's going to be catastrophic.
Sure. Last question, segue to Taiwan. How is your relationship with the current Taiwan administration? And Taiwan election, president is coming up. Are you monitoring it? Are you concerning if a more pro-China candidate wins the election? Your dynamic between the Central Tibetan administration and the Taiwanese government might change.
As a pretext, Chinese government had earlier put it as a precondition to His Holiness to say that that His Holiness should say Taiwan is part of China, which we believe we have nothing to do, because Taiwanese are Taiwanese and they have a totally different historical background with the mainland, and we have a total historical relationship with the mainland. But through the years, after Chiang Kai-shek reached Taiwan and the Kuomintang ruled Taiwan for many years, they also followed this, they had established this Mongolian Tibet Affairs Commission, even in Taiwan. And that created some problem within our community. Now that has dissipated. The lawmakers, even though they are not able to change the constitution right now, this is a big problem for Taiwan's democracy. If they change the constitution, then the mainland China would consider it as an act of sovereignty, and they could have severe consequences. So because of that reason, they are not able to change the constitution, but then practically they have stopped supporting Taiwan, Tibet, Mongolian Commission. So it has become more like a cultural institution right now. So in that respect, people-to-people relations are also not that much right now. At one time there used to be some, but then immigration policies in Taiwan are also hampering that. Everybody is talking about more improvement and better relations, but on the ground there are things that needs to be addressed. When I was elected to this post, we received a congratulation letter from Joseph Wu, the current foreign minister, and he had restated Taiwan's policy on Tibet in the sense of Tibetans having the right to self-determination. So that being said, our relations remain status quo. We do have two of our ministers went there. Some of their leaders come here. And the Taiwanese office in Delhi and our office in Delhi are very much in close touch with each other. So all those relations are very much there. But we are not looking at coalitions right now. So I think Taiwan issue has been taken up very much by the international community, not just in the West, but in the region. So I think AP4 is also very concerned, and independence or the present status quo of Taiwan is very, very essential for security and stability in the whole region, including Japan and South Korea and other countries. So China, unless they want to doom themselves, will have to think it through many, many times before they take any action, unless they feel very desperate. That's what the world fears. Anybody with an unstable mind can do anything. It happens. I'm not astounded by history. When Mao asked Chinese people to kill all the birds, Chinese people kill all the birds without thinking the consequences. And then the ecological consequences had to be, and then everybody melting their metals. Yeah. It happens still, but very unfortunate. And let's hope there will be a day when every people in this world can say that I live in a free world. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.